Hi, this is Brad Linder with Liliputing, and this is the GPD Win 2 handheld gaming PC, which is a tiny little computer that has a physical keyboard, physical gaming buttons, a 6-inch 720p display, and an Intel Core M3 7Y30 dual-core Kaby Lake processor, 8 gigs of RAM, 128 gigs of storage, and out of the box it ships with Windows 10. But it is capable of running different software, and so that's what I wanted to show you in this video. Now, I tried a couple of different Linux distributions, and the two that I found that work best are Ubuntu 17.10 and Fedora 27. So I'm going to go ahead and show you Fedora because everybody always tries Ubuntu. The user experience is actually pretty similar with the two different operating systems. So what I'm doing here is I've got a USB flash drive that's been prepared with the software, and I'm plugging it into the back. And now we're going to turn on the device. And as it gets ready to boot, I'm sort of just going to hit the escape key repeatedly. Okay, actually, it was still shutting down. Okay. Delete works as well. Escape or delete will both get you into the firmware settings. And once there, you'll notice that everything is turned sideways. Let's see if we can fit it on the screen here. So you can use the buttons here to move around. And while we're here, I'll point out there's actually a ton of CPU configuration, power, performance, other configuration options that you can adjust. I haven't really played around with these too much, but I know other people have in order to sort of overclock the device. Anyways, once you get to the save and exit menu, if you go all the way down to the bottom, once you've got that flash drive, a bootable flash drive inserted, you'll see an option that says something like UEFI USB 2.0 flash drive. So I'm going to choose that. And then from here, we see that we've got a boot menu that gives us the option of starting the live operating system. Now this goes a little bit more smoothly in Ubuntu, I've noticed. When I'm using Fedora, it takes a moment to load, and then when it does load, we're going to see a ton of error messages. But if you wait and sort of stick through it, it should boot into the operating system. Now, this is a prototype. It's sort of a second-generation prototype as far as I can tell. Some of the earlier units that were sent out to other people to test have some slightly different performance capabilities. So on this particular model, what I've noticed is I've tried a bunch of different operating systems, including Ubuntu and Fedora, and in none of them have I been able to get the touchscreen to work out of the box or the gamepad. Mouse mode works fine, the keyboard works fine, sometimes the keyboard shortcuts work fine. As is the case in this particular operating system, but the touchscreen just doesn't work. I've seen other people who have run Ubuntu or other operating systems, well, particularly Ubuntu, and been able to use the touchscreen. That's just not something that works on this model at this time. It might be something that could be fixed with future updates. I'm not positive. Another thing, and this seems to be pretty much universal, is it out of the box thinks that your screen is sideways. So you're going to need to sort of futz with that a little bit. So let's go ahead and close. Say we're going to try the live experience instead of installing it. And now I'm going to go to the display options. And from here, let me actually adjust the camera so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to orientation, portrait left, exit, and it's kind of tricky to do this sideways. Apply. Okay, keep changes, and now we've got everything the right way. From here, I can go ahead and connect to the internet. And of course, if you're happy with the experience, you can go ahead and install it to the hard drive or the solid state drive. In this particular instance, because the touchscreen just doesn't respond at all, it doesn't seem like something that I really wanted to spend a lot of time doing. But I will show you some of the stuff you can do just to show that it works fine. As I mentioned, volume and brightness shortcuts, no problems in Fedora here. As you can see, the mouse mode is working. And the keyboard works. So really, it's everything but the touchscreen and the gamepad as far as I can tell.
Let's suppose that you're writing a really important email to a colleague.
No problem with video. And even though we've got a 720p display here, let's go ahead and crank it up to 4K resolution just to show you that video playback works just fine. So we're streaming 4K video from YouTube in Fedora. And it works fine. We can install software. It might take a moment for that to load, so I probably should have started this earlier. What else can we do? We can load a terminal emulator, or actually just a terminal. Still loading. That's not quite what I meant to do there. So again, multitasking works reasonably well. We've got various things happening. Let's go ahead and open up a web browser again. Well, that's interesting. All right, so we've got video playing in one window, still playing in the preview mode. At the same time, we've got a game that's installing. We've got a terminal running. So generally speaking, it works pretty nicely. Now you might hear the fan is sort of kicked into high gear. So I'm doing a lot, and I'm not sure how much it likes that. Let's go ahead and close a few apps. And now we've got SuperTux cart installed. And what I wanted to show you here is that, again, the gamepad does not work out of the box, but you do have the option of going into the settings, and if I can remember how to get to the settings, well, let's go ahead and start a game, and then I'll show you that we've got 3D graphics going here. So I'm using keyboard shortcuts to do this, which is a little tricky, but if I go into options and controls, first of all, I'll show you that when I try to add a device, it just doesn't let me. And when I tried doing the same thing with SuperTux, the sort of Super Mario clone, it had a manual mode, but it just didn't recognize the gamepad at all. So that's not an option. But these guys up here, it does recognize as if they were keys on a keyboard. So if I wanted to assign steer left, I can do that, and it says A. And if I want to assign steer right, it says D. So it's sort of like using these keys down here on the keyboard, but we have the option of using this up here. Now, I find that the accelerate button is not something that I necessarily want to use on that particular keypad, so I'm going to go ahead and say, let's make that the A button. And brake, let's make Y. And fire, let's make X. All right. So let's go back to the game, and now I can steer and accelerate this way. That's much easier to play. Now again, because of the limitations here, I'm not sure that I would necessarily recommend using Linux if you were primarily planning to game, at least not on this particular prototype until the issues are resolved. Or if you're a little bit more of an advanced user who might have an idea of how to get the touchscreen and gamepad drivers to work. But you can see that basically everything else is working. We've got 3D graphics, we've got 4K video playback, we've got obviously fan control because the fan did kick in pretty well, and you can even do some gaming on it. So the problem is you can't exit or do anything else using the touchscreen, but you can use the mouse to do that. So that's a quick look at Fedora running on the GPD Win 2. It's going to be very similar to what you would get with other Linux-based operating systems, such as Ubuntu, or I tried Linux Mint. The main reason that Linux Mint was not quite as useful was basically that some of the keyboard shortcuts didn't work. I think volume might have worked and screen brightness didn't, or something along those lines. But for the most part, everything worked out of the box in terms of Wi-Fi working, mouse mode working, and the keyboard working. So Ubuntu, Linux Mint, Fedora. I also tried Debian Linux, and if I remember correctly on that one, the Wi-Fi might not have worked out of the box, but you can sort of pick and choose, try them out on a USB flash drive, and see what works before deciding if you want to install one to the SSD. And then you can dual boot Windows and Ubuntu or Fedora or something else, or you can completely change the operating system if you're not a Windows fan. As I said, though, I think in terms of gaming performance, you're probably better off sticking with Windows for now. And I think the main reason to buy this particular device is probably if you want a device for gaming. There are other, not a lot of other, but there are other options if you want something that's going to be more of a pocket terminal. In fact, GPD, the company that makes this, also makes something called the GPD Pocket, which is more of a laptop-style design without the gaming buttons. And that might be more appropriate if you wanted to use it as a general-purpose PC. But in terms of being able to game, but then also being able to boot into Linux and maybe do a little bit of development work on the go. I don't know if I would want to type on this keyboard as a developer, or just if you're a fan of open source software and wanted something a little bit different. It does work. It works pretty nicely. except for the touch screen and the gamepad. Now, again, I did see a video posted by The Fox, that's PHAWX, that you can check out on YouTube that shows Ubuntu running with the touchscreen working on his GPD Win 2 demo unit, but he has an earlier version, so it seems like maybe they changed something in terms of the firmware or maybe even the touchscreen itself. I'm not positive, and I can't necessarily say that what you're seeing here is going to be entirely reflective of the finished product. This is a prototype that was shipped to me in January, February of 2018, and it might not be exactly the same as the devices that are going to be shipping to users later this year. This is not supposed to be finished and released to the public for a couple more months, so hopefully some of the kinks will be worked out, but generally speaking, some things might be a little bit different. But with a Core M3 processor with the 8 gigs of RAM, 16 or 128 gigs of storage, the 720p display, and the keyboard and touchpad, or the keyboard and mouse mode working, for the most part, it is something that you can run Linux-based software on, and that's most of what I wanted to show in this video. So this is Brad Linder with Liliputing. You can find more details about the GPD Win at liliputing.com, or check out the YouTube channel, Liliputing, for more videos showing off different features and performance while playing games and doing other things on this little tiny handheld PC. So there you go.